feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled Tiff review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rorabeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchen.
Matt, day one is done. We watched two films in theaters.
Usually, that's a slow start for us, usually.
Yeah, usually it's the first day of TIFF is usually like a 4 or 5 movie day, and usually we do watch quite a few of them at the TIFF Bell Lightbox.
Or
this
Scotiabank,
time,
usually.
Or Scotiabank. But I mean, in past years, when there's been films that are either Amazon or Netflix releases, because Cineplex doesn't play those films,
or they used to,
we usually kick it off at the Lightbox.
Mm-hmm.
And this year was no exception, with A Hero, which you can listen to or watch our review of that as well. But we're not here to review A Hero, the Ashghar Farhadi film. No. We are here to not sing the praises or even sing mercifully for the people listening or watching, but we're here to critique the musical movie adaptation of one Dear Evan Hansen.
Yes, the opening night film to the 2021 Toronto International Film Festival. I believe the first musical since Score, a hockey musical.
And does it live up to those expectations?
We'll let you know which one in our complete ranking of. Is it the only two musicals that have opened the festival? Probably,
well, there was the
right?
music doc, the U2 music doc that opened back in, I think, like 2011 or 2012. But only one of those two films, Score, a hockey musical, and Dear Evan Hansen, features Olivia Newton-John. I'll let you guess which one.
Cool. Yeah, like Eric mentioned, we are covering the entirety of the 2021 Toronto International Film Festival. You can catch all of our reviews, all of our coverage right here on Untitled Movie Reviews on podcast services, or over on the Untitled YouTube channel. You can just search Untitled Movie Reviews, Untitled TIFF 21, just Untitled. There'll be links to everything over on our Letterboxd HQ, which is Untitled_movies. All of our YouTube videos, everything will be over there. But make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, all that jazz, so then you get all of our TIFF coverage over the next week and a half. But yes, today, as Eric mentioned, we are reviewing
All That Jazz, a great movie musical.
There you go. Was that intentional? No, it was not. Stephen Chbosky's Dear Evan Hansen. Eric, what a ride this was. We actually rode a GO train home, but the movie itself, why don't you let people know what Dear Evan Hansen is?
I don't think we even need to talk about what it is. I think where we need to start is when the trailer first was released, the major criticism, and partly out of context, because a trailer is, showing clips from various scenes of the film and edited in a way to, consumers and to market a movie. So, to give the film the benefit of the doubt, you need to see it, from beginning to end. But the main sort of takeaway from the early marketing of the movie was having Ben Platt, who was in the stage adaptation, reprise his role of the titular Dear Evan Hansen, but looking like
musicals love a good reprise, right?
Yes, but looking like a 40-year-old teenager. And again, this is a criticism that's come up time and time again, and it won't be the last time it's brought up.
Speaking of Olivia Newton-John and Grease,
exactly, or Beverly Hills 90210. Even in superhero movies, like having Andrew Garfield as
forever.
Peter Parker.
I mean, just in movies in general, not just in TV shows, like you're mentioning. Like, this has been a trope, or not even a trope, but just like a thing that's happened in high school set movies for the longest time, and television shows. And you think we'd be beyond that at this point, but this proves us wrong. And I get the reasoning there of being like, okay, he was in the stage show. He's very good in that show, supposedly. But anyways, we'll get into it. Yes, you were talking.
But Matt, I think it's safe to say that Ben Platt goes splat in this performance, which I don't know where to even start with this, other than to say, like, okay, if you've seen the movie musical, or on when it was
the Broadway
on
musical,
Broadway, or if you listen to the soundtrack and have an affinity for it, you know, we don't mean to criticize your love of the material or even the film. If you like the movie, we're not we never want to, you know, disparage or you know, be mean spirited towards somebody
No,
that
no, no,
likes it,
no. Yeah, yeah.
especially if it connects with you on an emotional level. It helps you get through something. That is wonderful, and that catharsis is something that I think both Matt and I wish we had with the film. But
Mhm.
we're going to be critical of the movie, and also we will be talking about probably some trigger warning
Yeah.
issues that come up in the film, because the movie is centered around a suicide, and you know, that is a very sensitive subject matter. Personally speaking, I've had a family member who committed suicide, so this will affect my review and how I see it from that perspective as well. And I think that with this film, or what you have here, is a high schooler who, you know, is played by Ben Platt, Evan Hansen, going through a really rough patch in his life, to the point of, you know, him being on multiple medications, but being played as a caricature with the way that sort of he gestures and sort of his mannerisms. You see almost this weird sort of um overly stylized performance that feels very much like, you can tell Platt has a theater background. You know, he's accentuating as much as he possibly can and going over the top. And
Which is something we see a lot in, you know, Broadway adaptations and just stage translations to, you know, cinema in general, I think.
or they go the opposite, where they're stiff, and they
Right.
and like, I think of someone like Jonathan Groff in Mindhunters, where like he
Oh,
was
sure. Yeah,
weird
yeah,
and
yeah.
stiff and felt miscast in that. But then you see him in the Hamilton recording, and you're kind of like, oh,
He's
he's
so good. Yeah.
amazing in that.
Yeah.
And like, I wish he was like that in, you know, the other stuff that we've seen him in, you know, in terms of film. But here, yes, you have a very it's a caricature in terms of how uh Evan Hansen is coping with anxiety and depression, to the point where it's very distracting, on top of the fact that he's caked in makeup and a wig to disguise the fact that he is not an adolescent. He is a full-grown man.
27-year-old man. Yeah.
But it makes it more distracting when you see him walking around a high school. And yeah, there are other actors that are around his age range, or maybe a little younger, but he almost looks like an SNL or Mad TV you know, character come to life, and it never feels completely you know, authentic to the role, and it's just so distracting. And we'll talk more about that later. But the plot of this movie is literally um Evan Hansen, you know, confronts this other kid, Connor Murphy, who, you know, is also a bit of an outcast, an outsider. And Connor's going through his own problems. He takes a note that Dear Evan Hansen is, you know, writing due to therapy. He's kind of getting through the day doing these sort of self-written letters that, you know, is taken. And then, you know, a couple days later, we find out that Connor has taken his life. And the letter that Evan wrote, that Connor took from Evan, was on his persons at the time, and his parents are the ones that have it. His mother is played by Amy Adams, and the stepfather, I believe, I'm blanking on the name, but he was on Law and Order in one of the later seasons.
Right. I'm trying to think. Is this I'm trying to which one what was the dad's name?
Oh, hold on just a
Is
second.
it
I'm just going to look
Greg
this up.
Oliver?
No,
No.
it is Danny Pino.
Danny Pino. There we go.
Yeah,
Got it.
so Danny Pino, who was on, he's a New York character actor, and was on like, oh, Law and Order SVU for some of the later seasons. So they, you know, talk to him in the principal's office, Evan Hansen, and say that, you know, this is what they found. And Evan Hansen, before he can say, well, that's his letter, Amy Adams's character basically, you know, wants to hear whatever she does to, in order to, you know, fill that void, and not feel so grief stricken, and feels like at least she, you know, this kid had somebody in his life to confide in. And so from there, um things escalate in a kind of snowball kind of way where they just get out of hand, but they also morph into a weird kind of faux family that Evan's always wanted, and he's manipulative, he's self-absorbed, he handles the situation in a way that some people would argue that it's very much like a teenager, even though he does not look like a teenager ever.
I think that's one of the biggest problems, right? Is
Yeah.
like, you can kind of excuse some behavior when you're of a certain age before you kind of mature and know better. And sometimes you can get in over your head, and and I get that that's what they're trying to do here. And if he really is supposed to be 16, 17 years old, or I think they're applying to college, so probably around 17, right?
Yeah.
um like, you can kind of go, okay, you can make a mistake, but he goes so deep into this lie that you go, okay, maybe I would have given you like a third of what you actually do before I would have been like, all right, you got to then realize like you're in too deep. You got to get out of this yourself. And then on top of that, which you just mentioned, like Ben Platt, like I know, guys, yeah, we're going to dunk on him over and over again, but it's just bad casting. Like, I get you cast him because he's great in the stage show,
And
but
he's familiar with the material.
but then that doesn't work. Like, you don't have to do that. Like, this is supposed to be a different adaptation of it. You don't need the guy who was in the stage show when it was made, 7 years ago, when he was 20. Like, what year did that come out? Oh, 2015, so 6 years ago. Yeah, he was 21 when it first came out, right? So like, I understand there. Then you should have gotten someone who was in their early 20s, or find a teenager too to do it, and then maybe you could connect with the character a bit more to understand that he's a bit over his head. But when and kind of go, okay, well, yeah, he should have known better, but he's young. But when you see Ben Platt there and he looks close to 30, like pushing 30, it just doesn't work, and you lose all sympathy for him, because in your head you're like, this guy should know better, because he just looks like he's old enough to know better. So
But he gets
anyways,
sucked
yeah.
into this con that he has created, and he starts to enjoy it as well and indulge in it because he sees Connor's family as the family he's always wanted,
Yeah,
and it
I
gets
never
even
had, yeah.
more creepy where he has this yearning for Connor's sister, played by Caitlin Dever, and then it becomes weirdly almost like incestual in a
Yeah,
weird way, like faux incestual, because he wants to take over the role that Connor, that role of
had
being
in
the
his family,
brother.
but then he wants this romantic relationship. And it all stems from how he felt about Zoe, who is Caitlin Dever's character, right? Like, the
Yeah.
movie's it hinges on that, how he feels at the beginning,
And
about.
also going through his own
Sure.
trauma
And we
and
talked about that. That's
depression.
not really it isn't, it can be, but you shouldn't use it as an excuse. Like, you should still kind of like, I get it's tough, and everyone deals with things in their own way, but um it shouldn't. The movie does such a weird job of taking the focus away from Connor, and his life and what led him to suicide, and just focuses so much on the Evan Hansen character. And like we keep saying, like, there's nothing sympathetic there, even though he's dealing with his own shit, and it is awful, but like, it is really no excuse. And then the further and further he gets into this and into this lie, you kind of just, again, it's so hard to kind of sympathize with that character, and he ends up just coming across as like horrible. And then going into some of the, if I can take the reins here for a
Yeah.
sec, Eric, like the music, you talked about the incestuous thing with the sister, and like, it's just because there is a song in the movie where he's like singing about the sister, but he's saying the brother said these things about her, but really it's Evan saying things, because he's just basically co-opted and like, kind of, took Connor's life and kind of sprinkled some things that he feels to say to this family. And there's it just feels so tonally awkward with each song that happens. And I think when you're dealing with such serious subject matter like this, putting it into a musical where the songs feel weirdly tonally off to what that subject matter is, whether it's a weird song where he's singing about the sister from the brother's perspective, but it's really his perspective, and then you get kind of creepy serial killer vibes from that, or you get like a thing where he's faking emails about, you know, his friendship with this guy, and you have the kid who just killed himself singing and dancing in like a goofy kind of way based on like making up, they're writing the letters, and he's singing them as they're kind of writing them and editing them, so it has this kind of comedic vibe to it. And this is moments after you kind of find out this kid killed himself, and it's just bizarre tonally, and it's so sincere. But then at the beginning, I'm like, it feels like a pitch black comedy to me, where I'm like, this is really dark subject matter that it almost seems like you're not taking it serious, and then it goes in the other realm where it's taking it so seriously that it almost kind of comes full circle and feels insincere by the end of it. And it's just it feels like it's all over the place, and it was kind of baffling to kind of watch. And I don't know, there's very little that feels redeeming, and it almost felt offensive by the end of it, of how it portrayed some of these things.
Oh, I
And I
think
think
it is
that's,
offensive, and I
yeah,
think that like it's so self-serious and self-congratulatory with how it's portraying suicide and sort of bringing
and mental health,
awareness
yeah.
and mental health, and thinking that it's advocating for these things when in fact it's portraying them in a way that's stigmatizing, and it kind of boxes them into this corner that turns it into, you know, an opportunistic ideal for the filmmakers to, you know, present it as a prestigious awards baity kind of movie that you look at it, it's like, okay, we have, you know, the actor from the original stage production, we have all these great actors in, you know, supporting roles, from Julianne Moore playing Evan Hansen's mom to, you know, Amy Adams, and both of which were also in the horrible Joe Wright movie together earlier this year, The Woman in the Window, and which is also really disappointing because you think two big movie stars like that, who are two great actors, you know, striking out twice in two separate films, it's just disappointing because you know, like you want like a Pacino and De Niro moment with
Yeah.
them that's on par with them as actors,
Well, they
and
have
you
one
never
scene
get that.
together, and it's just kind
Yeah,
of
and Steven
nothing.
Chbosky, who is the director, you know, he has handled his own, you know, material, adapting The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and even to a lesser extent, Wonder, with more sensitivity and care, where this feels more like a work for hire. But the work for hire, you know, it's like, okay, well, you know, dabbled in, you know, the teen drama or the teen angst movie before, so we'll hire you to do this.
Yeah.
And the film does a lot of stopping and starting when the musical numbers sort of hit, where it's like, okay, the film is a musical, but then it goes back to being,
It
you know, your
starts with
classic drama.
Yeah, it starts with a big song at the beginning. Then I could have sworn, Eric, for like 35 minutes there was no music, like at the beginning of the movie. It's probably less than that, but it felt like a long enough time right at the beginning of the movie where I'm like, wait, this is a musical. And then there hasn't been a song in way too long. And then they'll have like two songs in a row, and then they'll have a big chunk of the film that has no music. And I get that it's not a sung through musical. I'm not exactly, again, Eric and I haven't seen the stage show. So maybe they're taking, you know, something we were talking about on the way home too, of, you know, I think the best stage adaptations, you know, take what they did on stage and make something cinematic out of them. Well, I think this is pretty much a straight up adaptation, but you do get elements of that throughout the movie, whether it's some flashbacks or cross cutting of a different scene that you wouldn't actually get on stage. And I mentioned that song where they're kind of writing emails about one another. But um, I lost my train of thought. But what were you saying right before
Well,
this?
I want to mention that as well, with
Yeah.
adapting not even just movie musicals, but sort of, you know, stage to screen adaptations in general. Last year, we both really loved The Father, Florian Zeller's film, and he was able to take his stage adaptation and
Yeah. Thank you.
adapt
That's
it
where I was going.
and
Yeah.
sort of, you know, make it into a film and use the language of film in a different way from what the stage, was, and found that clever conceit in order to tell a really powerful story about someone whose mind is slowly slipping away,
Mhm.
and how devastating that is. There's nothing emotionally devastating in this film other than it takes
It
advantage
takes
of
emotionally devastating things and puts them on screen, but there's
yeah.
nothing emotionally devastating about it. Yeah.
I would say the closest scenes to being somewhat moving, or at least thoughtful, one of which we actually talked about on the ride home, with the Amandla Stenberg
Yeah.
character, who is somebody from, you know Evan's perspective, has it all, is popular, is
Mhm.
successful, is smart, is going places, but she is suffering in silence, and those who suffer in silence are anonymous, and there's a song that she sings
I
about
think
that.
probably the most impactful song in the movie and the most nuanced thing that they're kind of, if you can say that, but
Yeah,
like
I
that
will
they're
say
kind of.
this though as well. The Caitlin Dever song, I think, actually is. I don't know if it completely works, but the idea of when somebody passes away unexpectedly, we put them on a pedestal, or we don't look at them as people. We only have nice things to say, because like there's that saying, don't speak ill of the dead. But you also have to realize that sometimes nobody's perfect, and the way that she talks about Connor being abusive is something that doesn't mean that it should go away, or it shouldn't be not talked about, because
And then
she
I
went
feel
through
like,
some problems with him.
and even that point is kind of hypocritical to what the movie is portraying when you have this character, uh, Evan Hansen, that it doesn't really suffer many consequences for his actions. And you talked about, there's nothing really super emotional in the movie, even though it's showing you things that should be emotionally devastating. It kind of just, we're supposed to cheer for this guy. And I'm not going to spoil the movie or anything like that, but like, by the final act, you're kind of just like, oh, they're just wrapping things up, huh? And they're just not really like everything. They never go deep enough into anything. And Connor's whole story, it just feels like, Evan's kind of doing the same thing that you just talked about, where he's kind of being an asshole. And like you just said, it's interesting that the sister calls out her brother who passed away for that, and she's struggling with these feelings as he passed away. And then the Evan Hansen character, we're just supposed to kind of be like, well, he also he has a tough life and he feels bad. And by the end of all of this, it kind of just like, again, they show you a little bit of what he's trying to do to pay for his
Atone.
sins. Yeah, atone for his sins perfectly. But it's so quick, and it's so like, well, now I should do something, good to make. And even in that moment, it almost just feels self-serving, of like, I need to feel better about this, so I need to do this and then show this to other people anonymously, um because it'll make me feel better, even in the end. And then the whole movie just feels hypocritical, of what it's trying to portray. And then the movie itself is kind of doing what Evan is doing in the movie. And that's just what's frustrating about the whole thing, where, yeah, I agree with you that the Amandla Stenberg song is good, the Caitlin Dever song is good, and they're both pretty good in the movie.
Well, it's just a
Again,
shame, because someone like Caitlin Dever, who is amazing, was an amazing discovery in Short Term 12, great in book smart, um, is doing really good work right now, and it's just a shame that it feels like a performance where she's completely committed, and has a good singing voice, is just wasted on a bad film, or a film that's so
mhm.
misguided in terms of what it's trying to represent. And turning Evan Hansen at the end into a martyr just does not work, because the guy is so despicable and unlikable, and there's nothing wrong with having an unlikable
But commit to
protagonist.
that.
Yeah, like, this film is too afraid to be, you mentioned before, satirical or dark. And the film I kept thinking about that actually went that extra mile is the Robin Williams Bobcat Goldthwait film, World's Best Dad. And
Yeah.
that also deals with
Is it World's Greatest Dad or Best Dad?
world I think it's the world's maybe it's the World's Greatest Dad. It's been a while since I've seen it, but there's a scene in that film that almost to a T feels very similar
World's
to
Greatest Dad.
World's Greatest Dad. That feels similar to moments in the film that inspire sort of a false kind of pity and sincerity in the Robin Williams character, but at the same time you kind of understand where he's coming from and how things kind of escalate and go out of control, and you just feel like
Or even someone trying to kind of protect the legacy of their family even, or someone that, like, again, I don't remember the movie specifically, but I know I'm on the Wikipedia page and it was coming back to me. Like his son in that movie dies in a not embarrassing way, but then he tries to kind of, but that movie commits to him being kind of not awful, which is something we talked about, but it commits to that satirical tone that is very dark, but almost at least commits to that and has something more to say.
absolutely. And again, like, you feel like in the moment that Robin Williams's character makes a decision in terms of how he's going to tell other people what happened, that like he's digging that hole that he can't get out of. And it is interesting that we watch this and A Hero today, where you have characters put in situations where it becomes increasingly more difficult to get out of, and things just escalate. But I know, spoiler alert, you didn't love A Hero as much as I did, but I think that you can see that, you know, it's night and day in terms
Oh,
of how
totally.
these
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
filmmakers, approach that subject matter and see these characters where, the protagonist in A Hero is a more sympathetic person, even though he is very flawed, where Evan Hansen is hand scum.
No, yeah. Yeah. And they just rely so much on the, fake emotion of, well, he's going through a lot, that you're just supposed to excuse him of everything that he does because he's struggling as well, which I think is serious. And, but to me, that's just not, you can't just be like, well, he's struggling. So by the end of it, you kind of have to feel for him. And I'm like, no, sorry, you don't. You needed to work a little harder for me to get to that point. You can't just throw that at me and just make me by the end, okay, sure. Like, no, that's not how it works. So yeah, it falls completely flat. And again, going back to the music, like I said, it was tonally weird when they would break out into song when there was such serious subject matter. And I'm not saying you can't have a musical about something very, very serious, but like the songs themselves, like we talked about the two songs by the two female kind of leads in the movie, but it's just, I can't, a lot of it sounded the same, which is I think a point that you brought up too, where it's
Yeah.
not even like and Ben Platt has a good singing voice, and like
Yeah,
I
like
understand,
that is something that we should also say. That I
yeah,
think everybody in this movie can sing. It's
yes,
not like
everyone is
Mamma
good
Mia,
when,
where Pierce Brosnan is cast
yes,
because of name recognition
yeah.
alone, and then when he starts singing, it's almost
Like
ironically,
Amy Adams, Julianne Moore
yeah.
is great. Like everyone who sings in the movie is pretty good. I want to say the guy who played Connor Murphy, like the Colton Ryan, his sequences, even if I thought they were strange, he's good as well. So like it's not necessarily the musical performances that, hinder the movie, although none of the music really stood out to me to be like super memorable other
Or
than
how it's
maybe the,
integrated in the
yeah.
script. Like, it doesn't feel like, again, we talked about this, where the script, writing a musical, whether it be an adaptation or from scratch, is really difficult to do, because you're interweaving these songs into the narrative and knowing how to organically kind of shoehorn them in when you have these big moments, and then on top of that how the director films them, and then
Hmm.
on top of that how they're edited. It all plays a part in sort of matching the time and the rhythm of the song and the performer, and so much can go wrong, and clearly here it does, where it just is, and it's just not interesting. Like, if they had at least one song that was kind of a hook to get you invested in it, or something to take away, there's not that. Like, I mean, even though we didn't love In the Heights, the
Yeah, yeah.
main sort of opening number is a really well done number, and a good song. It's just that this doesn't have any of that, and it does also feel dated from that period. And also, with La La Land having done so well, it almost feels like you're starting to get that effect of, studios finally releasing all of these musical
Oh, we get a
adaptations that
couple
they've
of
been
them per
waiting
year
for.
since, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like even Wicked is, supposedly going to be in production finally this year, and it's been, you know, a long time coming since that has been sort of optioned by Universal to be made, which also released this into production. And so it's a real shame. And it just, again, like, there are moments where you can't help but laugh when Ben Platt is singing to, you know, the Murphy family, and is
In
almost,
times you should not be laughing,
yeah,
but
because it
it's like,
almost feels like he's a serial killer getting ready to, stalk his prey and pull out an axe and
yeah,
pull a Lizzie Borden on them.
his eyes are very bizarre
Yeah.
in a lot of the music. And you mentioned the wig and the makeup, and
Well,
it's
the way
just
he moves
like,
his body too, the
yeah.
posturing, it feels like it's like it's so self-aware, like he's so concerned with every movement.
And it
And
goes back to the stagey thing that you're talking that we and I know maybe we sound like a broken record in a lot of these, but then I think there's a reason that maybe we loved Hamilton on Disney Plus. Guess what? Because you put a camera on the stage, you can do fun creative things with camera work, record 3 different versions of the show, edit it together so you get camera angles you would never be able to see on Broadway, and if you're seeing it live and things like that. And then that's an interesting, fun way of showcasing a Broadway show. But once you take it and just adapt it on screen, they're two completely different mediums. And even in its storytelling, I think a lot of stagey storytelling and even the way people act in the songs and the way that the stage is all has to be so bombastic and so over the top, because you got to hit the people that are sitting in the nosebleeds in the third balcony or whatever.
it's
And like it's
projection,
it's
right?
projection, and like everything is a little bit, that's why a lot of musicals come off as corny. This never comes across as corny, but a lot of them come across as corny, at least to me personally, because when you adapt them to screen, it just doesn't translate well because people are overacting. The story is super in your face and overt and like and surface level, and but they're just throwing so much at you as well. Like this movie tackles online bullying, every form of like mental illness kind of thing people deal with within the last kind of 10-15 years, they throw at you in this movie. And I feel like that's the staginess of it. His makeup, his hair, the way that he's projecting. Like I'm even getting more animated as I'm talking here. It's just because that's how it comes across to me. And I feel like when you don't kind of like figure out how to translate it well to, the form of, a feature film and not a stage show, it just, you can do all the editing tricks, you can have flashbacks, you can have sequences that you would never be able to have on stage, but then in the end you're just adapting a stage musical and it just doesn't necessarily work. And if you want people, because like again, another thing that I argue a lot about is people who are like, well, they can just play the video game or they can just watch the stage show. If you like, when things are getting adapted, like any adaptation, or they can just read the book. Why don't you read the book? No, I want to watch a movie. I don't want to read the book. I don't like reading books.
And if it's
And
being
there's
made, I think that there's an obligation by the studio, by the filmmakers, by the screenwriters, by the original creators to look at that from the point of view of, okay, this can't be just a
straight up adaptation.
simplistic
Yeah.
adaptation. You need to do something different in order for it
To make
to
it one
be its own
worthwhile
thing.
and work in the medium that you're making it in. Because I will always be a proponent of, no, I want it to be turned into a movie or a TV show or whatever, because you know what? Now I can share this with my sister, because I was never going to go see Dear Evan Hansen. It came to Toronto, but I just don't go see many stage shows. There are ones here and there that I go see and I always enjoy it, because it's a very different medium. I'm sure maybe if I saw Dear Evan Hansen, I'd kind of be a little bit more forgiving in some of its storytelling or its
Well, you saw
themes. I
Book of
still,
Mormon, right?
yeah, and I love Book of Mormon, but and I'd be open to it becoming a movie because I want to share that with someone who hasn't been able to go, or if you live in a small town or you can't go to Toronto or you don't have the money to go do it. Like there's a plethora of reasons I will always say, yes, I'm all for making a theatrical adaptation of whatever, because it gives me another thing that I can share with someone who loves the other version of it, where I might not necessarily love that medium, but I love this medium, and now I can share it with them or whatever.
Or just give us a stage version that's like
And that's what I
Hamilton,
mean,
right?
though. So you can do it in a way where you make it more accessible to people, but you do it and stay true to, the stage show by showcasing why it was special on stage. And then that kind of stuff, that bombastic over the top, is more like, I can kind of appreciate it more in a stage format that's you're then being creative with how you're shooting it, but it's still on stage, rather than trying to take it and put it on screen. And I think that layer of realism, and that, suspension of disbelief kind of, breaks once you root it in a world that doesn't have that. I know it's fake when I go see it on stage, right?
Yeah.
The sets are fake. Like, I understand, you buy into that. But when you put it on screen and set it in quote unquote reality, even though everything Evan sings and the people in this movie sing are supposed to be, the spoken word, whether it's a speech or just a conversation or things like that. Like, I get that. Like, I understand what they're going for, but when they break out into song in mid sentence in a movie that's dealing with some of this stuff and set in a world where it's not a stage, it's life, it just feels weird and it feels inappropriate at times. And it just, and then that's why it doesn't land emotionally, is because I just, like, I don't know, the way that he just comes across as an asshole, or he comes across as manipulative, or like, and then that's why I couldn't connect with his, illness he's suffering, because like he breaks into a fun song and it's just like, I don't know. That's where the disconnect is with me. And that's why I don't think this movie works at all. Like, it just doesn't work at all. And it was baffling. And like, I hate being those guys too, that, come out, it's the big opening night movie at Tiff. And, I hate, guys, I hate when we don't like a movie. When we hate something, like, I hate it as well. Like, I wanted to love it. Yeah, I love dunking on how old he looks. That's fun. That's funny. It's
But
half of it,
it's
like,
also a fair criticism
yeah.
after having watched the film, that it is so
Oh, it
distracting
was
because
fun
he doesn't look like a real
before.
person.
No,
That's the biggest problem. It's not
and that's the
necessarily that he's
stagey
even
thing. It
old.
feels like he's in a
He
clown
looks,
costume.
yeah, it like
The curly, colorful wigs clowns wear, and
we
then,
talk about this all the time on the regular
and I don't
show,
want to
that
be an
old age
asshole. It's just
makeup
like,
is the worst when it comes to representing, an age demographic and aging up, a younger actor. This is the same exact thing. He doesn't look like a real person. He looks like Stewie from Mad TV, like if you were to put Mike McDonald in that role as dressed as Stewie, he would fit in or integrate in the same exact manner as, Evan Hansen, just maybe a little bit stranger. But like, it's just, it's
I'm
so,
looking at Stewie now.
look
Oh
what I can
God.
do.
Oh
But
man.
yeah, it's just, it's so hard to take seriously. And I understand that, like,
It was fun to dunk on it, but then when you see it in the movie, I went in with an open mind, and it just doesn't work. They should
no.
have cast someone more age appropriate. And I know I'm looking at the ages of everyone they cast around him. Yeah, they're all in their mid 20s, but they all look young compared to
And they
him.
don't
And
have
like,
prosthetics or wigs. They just again, like, yeah, he would have had a 5 o'clock shadow or maybe looked a little bit older. But if you took that makeup off and that wig off, at least he would look like a human being. And that would be better than having a character that looks like he's going to audition for, House 3 or something like that, which is like this really bad horror movie with all these weird creatures. He almost weirdly looks like Emperor Palpatine a little bit, with like kind of like the bloating of the
the
face.
way, and the white makeup, that's
Yeah,
kind of or the white kind of,
the
yeah, like,
pastiness of it.
especially in a big screen, which I made the joke about it being an IMAX on Twitter the other day. But like, I think you're really, oh, my contact's starting to mess up, karma. um you really can see the caked on makeup. Like, you can see how Eric and I, like, I can't grow a great beard, but if I shaved, and even by the evening, or, and I'm 32, okay, and yeah, not Chris Pratt, God, Ben Platt.
You can play 17.
I mean, by this point, like, I just, like, you can tell it's so obvious that, and we're repeating ourselves, but it's so obvious that they
It's just
are covering
baffling
up
though that like
his
these
5
things,
o'clock shadow.
yeah, these
And
things weren't considered by the studio. Like this was like they saw this movie and were like,
I mean, his dad's a producer. His dad produced the stage
yeah,
show. Like,
Mark Platt.
yeah, like it's, and it is what it is. But like, you think someone, the production company is Mark Platt Productions. And so like, it was inevitable. So
Right.
it's just like, but you should have maybe made it the year after it premiered if it was such a huge hit while he was still age appropriate. Or Eric, we'll wrap up in a second, everyone. Should have just de-aged him. Just bump the budget up to $200 million and just completely Irishman him. Even
Let's
though
get
he's only,
Weta into this movie.
yeah, like get Weta in, get James Cameron in here. Just go, okay, Ben Platt, you're 27. We need to make you look like you're 16.
James Cameron's like, we also made a Na'vi version of him just in case for
And
Avatar
like,
6.
I get that I like to think I don't look that much different than I did when I was 16. But I shared a photo of me and you from Tiff 10 years ago or 9 years ago. We definitely look different.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
like,
I look like a bloated, disgusting corpse.
now or then?
Both, but for different reasons.
No, I know. We like you. It's
the
funny.
only way this movie works is if you look at it from the point of view of it being a sequel to Old. Evan Hansen went on a summer vacation to the Old Beach and came back looking like that.
Yeah,
and that's the only way that movie works.
Broke his arm escaping. Anyways, guys, you can tell we're passionate though. It's day one of TIFF. We're, it's opening night. We're trying to get it all out. But anyways, I'll take a wild misfire that's kind of fun to talk about over most middle of the road stuff, I guess. But like, it's really not good. I'm gonna give it a 1.5.
And it's not even good in the like. It's not even ironically bad.
Yeah.
Like Cats.
I said like
so ridiculous.
Yeah, because at first I thought it was gonna go there, where I'm like, oh, this is gonna be an unintentionally funny pitch black comedy because it's about very serious, dark things. But I shouldn't be laughing at it, but I am. But then it kind of just, that loses its kind of, fun a little bit in, and it's not fun at all, but you're just kind of like, oh my god, and then it ends up just being bad. So
yeah,
1.5 for me.
I'm gonna give it a 1. I thought it was pretty bad.
Love it. I love it. Spicy. We're starting TIFF off with some spicy takes, and I love it. Thank you all for listening. If you are intrigued by this nonsense, you can check out all of our TIFF reviews over on Untitled Movie Reviews on podcast services, or right here on YouTube. If you're watching the video version, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell. You'll get all of our TIFF reviews. We already have a bunch up that you guys can watch or listen to right now. Eric already mentioned A Hero. You can check out a review for that. T10, the Midnight Madness opener. So we covered both opening night films for Midnight Madness and regular TIFF. We got a review up for Memoria or Memoria. Still trying to figure out what the proper way of saying that title is. And I think that's it right now.
Night Raiders.
Oh, and Night Raiders. Thanks. We just put that up this morning. Already loopy, as you guys can tell by this review.
Oh, yeah.
So it should be fun. Each day, and Eric and I are going to get home way too late. We're going to record these way too late. We're going to be very tired.
So you're going to get incoherent reviews.
Right. Which I feel like we did.
Regular reviews.
And usually we'll keep it a little shorter than this.
But this needed to be dissected and discussed.
It's the opening night movie, baby.
Because we were disgusted by it.
Go check out our Letterboxd HQ Untitled_movies. All of our reviews and everything will be over there. Follow Eric and I on social media. We'll be giving little reactions, social reactions after we get out of each movie. So I'm at Matt Rorabeck. He's EM6211. Until next time.
Way to go, Evan Hansen, for making it all about you.